Hello, social media followers, LinkedIn, Facebook, and everyone tuning in to our show. Welcome to the Beyond the Offer podcast. I'm your host, Rosanna Snedeker, joined by my co-host and friend, Bill Gates. Thank you for tuning in as we tackle the latest trends and challenges in talent acquisition and human resources. We are very excited for our very first episode with two guests on the podcast. Today, we are meeting with Mark Tumiel and JC Rivera from Newcastle Investors, a Chicago-based real estate firm. Mark is the SVP of Human Resources, and JC is the head of talent acquisition. They've worked at impressive companies like Roti, Orbitz, and Cushman & Wakefield throughout their careers. We're very excited to have both of you on the podcast, and welcome to Beyond the Offer.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Guys.
Yeah. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Well, we jump in with, a first question that we ask all of our guests. We love just to hear about your backgrounds and how both of you got into HR and recruiting. So Mark, we'll let you kick it off.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having us here. I know it's a short week with Thanksgiving here, but looking forward to the conversation. Yeah. So I started out in HR actually through school. So I actually have a degree in business and HR. So I'm one of the kind of unique ones, I think, that kind of came in through my academics. And after I graduated from the University of Buffalo, I moved to Chicago as a 21-year-old looking for a fun big city to play in and work in, and I found a job in IT recruiting at that time. It was 1999, so it was like the tech boom happening. And Chicago was a great spot to come to, and became a headhunter with a third-party search firm for about a year and a half. And then after that, found my first corporate role with ComEd as a campus recruiter and started my HR generalist kind of activities at ComEd.
Ro and I can relate to the third party IT recruiting. That's where we first met, actually. So
yeah, 21 coming to Chicago, IT recruiting is where we both started as well. So
it was definitely a hot spot. Unfortunately, I was not a great salesperson, so I didn't make a ton of money, but I know others did, and it was fun. It was a fun community to be a part of because the recruiters there, we just had a really good time working together, even though it was a grind.
Yeah,
I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to that too as well, that have been on the IT third party side too. They either have probably PTSD and horror stories, or it was their first job into recruiting where they've been for a while. But that's great. JC, what about you?
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, thank you guys for having me. And I have a unique background. I worked quite a few different capacities before recruiting. I've done everything from sales to working at a fintech company. I was actually laid off from that fintech company right before I started in recruiting, and I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And my wife actually worked for a global real estate firm. She was working with staffing agencies, and I think through one of her conversations, she asked, "Hey, are you guys hiring?" And of course they were at the time, and it was a finance and accounting firm recruiting Big Four auditors out of the Big Four into smaller regional firms. So that was my first kind of crack at recruiting, and is really what I call like a crash course, right? Like Mark said, this is where you learn a ton. You learn a lot of, you learn what you're made out of, I think is what I got out of it. So, resilience, negotiations, all that good stuff. But it was a fun, year and a half, I think, is how long I was there. Then I landed my first job at Cushman & Wakefield. Shout out to Danielle Dutcher, gave me my first shot. And then so 7 years later, here I am. But it's been a fun ride.
I love it. It's funny. I know Danielle as well, JC.
Yeah,
so.
Amazing.
Full circle there. Yeah. I mean, I think starting out on the agency side, you learn so much so quickly. And it's great for us that you both understand what that world is. So you can kind of relate to what Bill and I do. So
yeah. Now, Mark, tell us a little bit more about Newcastle and, Newcastle Investors, type of real estate you focus on, et cetera.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Newcastle Investors we're a real estate and development firm in Chicago. So we're basically retail and multifamily. On the retail side, we have probably about 60 properties with about 160 tenants. So our focus has been boutique tenants. So we're agnostic with kind of industry, but everything from restaurateurs to really great consignment shops throughout the city. So if you're walking through Andersonville or the Gold Coast area, a lot of those spaces we own the buildings, and then our tenants are the people that reside in those for their businesses are our tenants. So we manage those properties. And then on the multifamily side, we go out to the community as reside living. So we have probably about 40 buildings across Chicago, a heavy concentration in Lakeview, West Loop, Gold Coast, and kind of that uptown area for providing great living experiences for our residents. So we probably have about 3,500 people that reside in our buildings. A couple things that are unique about us: we're owned and operated, and we're long-term investors. So we don't just buy buildings and outsource them or try to resell them. We literally are long-term investors. We want these properties in our portfolio. And because of that, our employee base is really diverse. We have both kind of field and operation, field and kind of a corporate group of employees that service these buildings. And again, as long-term investors, we're here to create an amazing living experience for the residents. So we have a concierge model. So regardless of what building you live in, you can have a 24/7 concierge contact to help you with issues or situations that are happening, or the things that are going on in the area or the city during the weekend that they can help connect you with. And just providing a great amenity space. So a lot of our properties have gyms and offer a lot of discounts within the community areas as well. So we have if you live in one of our buildings, you have a really great experience being part of Chicago.
Is there plans, or is there any properties outside of Chicago, or are there growth plans to eventually, have properties outside the Chicago area?
Yep, not for Newcastle Investors. So the other aspect of our business, we're actually institutionally based or institutionally funded. So our capital comes from Washington State Pension Fund.
Oh, okay.
So the pension fund has a portfolio of other REOCs, or real estate investment companies, that they are part of the pie of the pension. So we are specific for Chicago, our strategy Chicago. We love Chicago. That's why I joined it, because it's so cool to be able to be in a business that's literally in Chicago. And JC and I can run around to our portfolio and literally see the entire buildings and our entire teams in about a day if we needed to get in the car and go around.
Mhm.
But the pension has a larger footprint and has industrial and commercial and real estate. So we're part of a bigger family. And that also provides us a great capital base to acquire and develop our business.
Is that under a different Newcastle Investors umbrella, or out of your purview for the commercial and industrial focus side?
Yeah, it's out of our umbrella, but it's part of the PEC
Got it.
and Washington State pension umbrella. So, it provides not only the capital and the partnership and learnings in these other industries. We get together twice a year as a leadership team to talk about challenges within the industry and how our business is doing compared to the others, and share best practices and so forth. And it's also great just to be a part of, and I think JC can contest to this, as you hire, we're not working for one individual wealthy person. We're working for a pension fund. So the people in Washington State that retire, that are teachers or firefighters, that's our money that's going back into that pension is paying for them to be able to have a living after their retirement piece. So it's a kind of a very full circle perspective of just making sure that we're putting our time and energy and our capital into the right, great things versus just wealth into someone's family.
Oh, and I'm sure it diversifies the portfolio and the pension fund for them as well, right?
Yep.
I imagine COVID, for example, I'm sure hit, everyone probably knows, a lot of the office markets and more on the commercial side of things. And,
Yeah.
Which I'm sure it's probably affected the residential and multifamily side too, where, you've been able to maybe expand that space too. So,
Yeah, residential has been doing much better just because with the market for the housing interest rates and everything. And so it's actually benefited our company. Having the backing with a pension, it provides us stability and consistency. So even though we're, we're riding the market and understanding that, we're also just conservative, just as everybody is, to say how fast or how slow do we want to go so we can step into things in the right way. And it's been great to have a really professional backing and the capital around us to do that without being in a different situation where we have to make fast decisions that might detract us in a different way that we wouldn't want to.
interesting. Are there residential trends in this space within the residential real estate market that, either of you guys have kind of been seeing within your guys' roles, just within the last year, for that matter?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the residential side and how the market's shifted, I mean, we like I said, our occupancy has been great. West Loop has always been booming. It's getting a little flatter now, but we have a lot of properties out in that area. And from getting out of COVID and concessions and more on the tenant side and concessions on the residential side too. We came out of that pretty fast and we're able to are, tracking to better than what we were at pre-pandemic and continue to see that improve. I think Chicago's a great city to live in and we have a great area for universities to be coming into as, people leaving school and trying to find their first apartments and jobs. Chicago's a really big piece of the pie for that. And we've seen that happen and impact our financials in a positive way.
That's great. Yeah, I've seen your logo, Newcastle, on some buildings throughout the city. So the branding was definitely there as well. Yeah. And you said some of your employees live in your buildings as well, right?
Yeah, yep. We probably have, we have 150 employees across the company. We have about 9 offices throughout the city. So some of our employees sit within the buildings as property managers. Yeah, and they go through that experience, not just on the maintenance side to service the buildings, but we have a number of people. We offer a 25% discount for employees to come in. So if you want a 25% discount for monthly rent, our employees have the opportunity to get into that. And a lot of people take advantage of that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we call one of the properties the reside dorm. That's where I don't know how many employees we have there, but it's quite a bit with their families and all that good stuff. So they've also created their own little community up in that part in that property, which is nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, like we said in the intro, this is the first time we've had 2 guests on the podcast, which we're super excited about. So would love to hear just kind of the dynamic of how you both work together at Newcastle with HR and TA. I know being a smaller team there. Walk us through that and what that partnership looks like between the 2 of you.
Yeah, I can start with that. Yeah, it's definitely much different than what I've experienced in the past. Mark is a very hands-off kind of leader in the sense that, he wants you to kind of own your realm, if you will. He's definitely going to be somebody who's going to, kind of provide the bigger picture of what we want to accomplish. And it's kind of it's up to us to kind of figure out how we go about it. It's unique in the sense that I'm very close to what's happening on the employee relations side, performance side. So I kind of know what we need to plan for, whether it's specific roles that we need to kind of pipeline or understand how the business is going to shift over the next few years. I get much closer here than I think I ever have to that side of the business. But also it's a very collaborative environment. I think we've got a director of learning and development on our team, HR generalist, and then our office management kind of falls under us as well. So our reach is pretty wide, which is really nice. And I think that's the benefit of kind of being a small, agile team where everyone can kind of get their hands into different parts of the business. But yeah, no, it's fun. I think we work hard, play hard. That's a cliche everyone wants to share, but I think it's truly the case for our team. But yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited to see what we do over the next few years.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have like as JC said, our team, we're small but mighty. My philosophy has always been, I've been in businesses where I had recruiting kind of on the side and outside of an HR umbrella. And my philosophy for that is always to bring it underneath an HR element, because you always think of an employee life cycle, right? It starts with attracting, hiring, onboarding, promoting, having them leave, having them come back into the business. And, I think recruiting feels a little siloed when I've seen it in businesses separate. And I've been through a lot of companies that have aggressive mergers and acquisitions happening. So as I always brought in acquisitions into my business, has always brought recruiting underneath that fold. And it's just benefited from us, I think. I've seen in my past, just from a recruiter's perspective, is the career progression of where somebody wants to go on that can go a lot of different ways. And when you have, full talent underneath you and have somebody, when we hired JC, I didn't have a recruiter. I had recruiting as part of a generalist role, and I needed somebody to come in and wake up every morning and think about attracting and hiring our employment brand and getting out there every day, all day. And that's all I needed someone to do, because we didn't have that. And I think that by itself is such a big job. And then adding into, how do you promote and develop and retain our people? JC's a part of those conversations with the rest of my team, and us trying to all figure that magic sauce out to keep our great employees and deal with the market as it shifts.
It is always interesting when you see those decentralized recruiting groups. I think when I've typically seen it with clients that we've worked with and done placements, it's usually in a very specialized area like sales or
Mhm.
There could be one like in healthcare if it's like for nurses or something like that, but
Mhm.
it does become a bit more fragmented in that sense to when it's decentralized out of HR, right? Because they kind of feel like their own silo, and even though it's hard, right? When it's a part of the whole retention and acquisition process, and you have it
Mhm.
outside of the purview, it's harder for you folks on the HR side to corral what's going on from a hiring perspective. So communication clearly is important, but switching gears a bit more kind of to the recruiting side, JC, how do you manage like recruiting efforts, at the corporate level and like for the properties? I mean, how do they defer, and how do you like approach recruiting in corporate fashion versus field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from my perspective, there isn't a huge difference in terms of how we approach it. I think the good thing is that we consider ourselves one company operating under two different brands. And so, our focus is always going to be finding the best people for the role, right? And whether that's an analyst or a property manager, I think we're always going to, it's always going to come down to finding the best person. We do a few different things, maybe from like a assessment standpoint. Like you wouldn't interview an analyst the same way you would a leasing consultant. But I think the way we manage the roles and manage the managers supporting those roles is very similar. We still have the same types of conversations. And, like for example, if it comes down to, hey, I can't decide between, two great candidates, it's like which one is going to hit the ground running faster? Who are you going to spend the least amount of time trying to ramp up? If you have a really fast paced team. So I think the conversations are very similar. There aren't too many differences in terms of like process evaluation. Maybe is a little bit different, and we're going to go into 2025 really focus on that too, and trying to understand what drives high performance and how do we translate that to any type of role that we're working on. So yeah, I hope that gives you a good overview.
Yeah. What are there roles like? Talk to me a little bit about kind of the roles that you guys do fill for a lot of our listeners out there.
Mhm.
What are kind of some of the titles of those positions?
Yeah, so it range anywhere from on the property side, leasing consultants, property managers, maintenance, engineering technicians. On the corporate side, you've got anything from an analyst to a marketing specialist, finance and accounting, asset management, which is a very interesting group. That's really where the analysts kind of fall under. We've got a really cool like rotational program that analysts kind of go through. They oversee a little bit of acquisitions, asset management, finance and accounting, and I think that's the benefit of like coming into a small firm like this. Well, not, I don't want to say small in the sense of like reach, but I think, you know, if you're a leasing consultant, you still can get involved with some of the things property managers are doing, or you can connect with your marketing teams. We do quarterly meetings where the entire company gets together, and that's where everyone kind of networks and understands who's who. And so, yeah, I think the variety of roles here is really great. But I think the biggest thing that I always tell my candidates is that, you can start as a leasing consultant, but that's not where you have to kind of end your career. You can go kind of anywhere within the business. And hopefully as we grow, maybe over the next 5 years or so, there's new opportunities for folks too. But yeah, it's a variety. But again, we're all focused on one goal. It's delivering the highest level of experience to our residents. So it all kind of ties together.
Of those roles, is there like one or two that are some of the toughest to fill that, when you get that the new rec or job on your plate, there's a bit of a groan or
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. I'll definitely talk about the maintenance and engineering side. I think, back from my time, and I used to work 40 to 50 roles at a time in my first couple of years at Cushman, and they were all maintenance and engineering, and it was the same common issue across the board. It's you've got more people leaving those trades than going into them, so the pipeline or the pool of candidates is very small, and then you know you've got the challenge of actually getting people on site who are going to be dedicated to the vision of your company. A lot of them are either switching because they want an extra dollar or two an hour or whatever the case is. But here, we're very intentional about what we hire. I think every hire really matters here. So that kind of adds another layer of, I think, not necessarily complication, but just a nuance in our business. But yeah, maintenance and engineering, I'm sure everyone would agree who's in the property or even manufacturing space, like those are really tough roles to fill.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that before on our podcast before with other HR leaders, and it's especially that come from more of a manufacturing sector. It's kind of the same. I've related it to the problem we dealt with in like from 2007 to 2010 of like technology engineers. There's a huge shortage of
Mhm.
developers, and our education system didn't really have those in place. Now there tends to be a much higher shortage now in the mechanical space because the younger generations, it sounds like, don't, there's just a shortage in talent of folks
Right.
that are wanting to work with their hands and
Yeah.
go into actually a plant facility or one of your guys' places to fix an HVAC or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So hopefully that talent gap, I mean, gradually it will, right? I mean, eventually when a job obviously becomes in more demand, that typically pays more, but then more people usually gravitate
Yeah.
towards it. Have you started to see that during your guys' 2-3 years there? Or well,
Yeah.
3-4 years,
I
really?
think I think what's interesting is that, and maybe this happened around like 2008 when the market crashed, 2007, 2008. But I think what happens is when there's mass layoffs or a lot of uncertainty in the world and people are kind of like figuring out what's next for them, sometimes it forces them into these types of like trades. And so I don't quote me on this, but I think I saw a statistic recently where during this time you're seeing like a 7% increase in enrollment in those types of skilled trade schools. So, I mean, we may not see the impacts of that maybe until like 3 or 4 years from now when, more of them start to hit the market. But yeah, that's an interesting kind of fact to dive into a little bit. When the market's down, that tends to push people into those types of trades or, shorter like certification type of courses. Maybe it's different in today's world where you can get a coding degree or coding certification in like 6 months. But I think, not everyone wants to be a cybersecurity expert or a data analyst. Like people want to work with their hands. So it's about making these opportunities more visible. Like we've done that with us. We've done day in the life videos where we highlight, maintenance and engineering. The vision there was to really show off what it's like to work as a maintenance tech or an engineer. And so I think we really kind of hit it out the park with those videos because we put them on our job descriptions. We put them in the links when we send to candidates. When we send candidates like the interview scheduling links. And so they get a really good view in terms of what to expect into these roles. So it takes a little bit more effort, I think, and maybe more time to kind of comb through a lot of resumes, but I think we're approaching it the right way.
Yeah, and that's unique because I know when we've recruited for you, even at the corporate level, sending those videos, candidates have been really impressed by that and just getting a glimpse into like what it actually looks like, hearing from the employees. Not every organization is doing that. We can definitely attest to that.
Yeah, JC's done a great job at like a different way to a recruit, these days as the market's kind of a little bit quieter a little bit, especially in our industry. We just haven't seen a lot of movement in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So there's almost like a different approach you do as you switch your recruiting gears on, when the market is, when a lot of people are moving around versus when they're not. And I think getting into the communities and really getting just to know the network that we have. So we cultivate this like relationship with people before we hire. And I know you guys know that's a big key to it too. So when you might not be ready today, but you might be ready tomorrow. And JC, I mean, he's done a great job bringing technology in. We use Culture Index to help evaluate a little bit how the brain works as we get to know people and understand how that works is a little bit a part of the evaluation process. But yeah, we have a very specialized, we have specialized roles and we're pretty diverse. So I think even if you're talking about like that asset manager role, which is so hard to find, and the maintenance one that is so hard to find, and they're very different kind of world. The same thing goes to the fact of like just making sure we're bringing a different recruiting approach into it because we know, JC knows probably every asset manager within a 50-mile radius from our offices, so we can continue to keep them updated with what's going on at Newcastle. So when we are ready to pop somebody in, we can do that and find the best solution with it. And yeah, and we'll see what tomorrow brings, right? I have a nephew that's thinking about trade school today versus a 4-year degree, which was just different. My family is like, what are you talking about? He's like, of course I would do this. Why wouldn't I? Because they can make as much money as you do when you get out of a 4-year degree program these days, as it seems to be shifting into these other trades, whether it's plumbing or whatnot.
Yeah, those classes are being offered in high school more and more, and people are just getting more interested in them than years ago. So
referrals have been a really strong source for us to get new candidates in, especially around the maintenance and engineering roles. Yeah, it's, there's times throughout the year if it's really tough, or we've had a role that's been open for a while, or a team really needs help, we'll kind of increase that referral bonus a little bit,
Mm.
just to kind of give, higher incentive. And I'm very visible with the Reside group, especially at the quarterly meetings. I always announce and suggest referrals, and I always tell people, like, don't worry about the interviews and the evaluations. Like, if you meet an Uber driver who gave you an awesome ride home, like, grab their information and
Yeah.
let them know that we're always hiring. And if you go to a restaurant and you get great service, like, those are the types of people that we want. And so it's just about being visible and just kind of creating that awareness within the group, so that it gets people excited to refer people and take the pressure off of them having to worry about, like, whether that person's going to work out or not. Like, we don't hold anyone against, bringing someone in who just didn't work out. So yeah, it's been a good avenue for new candidates.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on a few things for our next question, but just, building from the ground up, Newcastle being a smaller organization, you said small but mighty. You both have had the opportunity to kind of come in and build from the ground up, create new processes, implement new things. What has worked? What have you learned over the past few years? I mean, you mentioned the referrals, the videos, implementing the cultural index. Anything else to kind of touch on there that has really worked out really well, that you have been able to come in and kind of create from scratch?
Mark, you've been here a little bit longer than me, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say, I think just building out the technology and really getting the engine to be created to make recruiting happen is a big deal. As I walked into the business, it's been probably about a little bit over 3 years now. I was brought in to kind of restructure the function. And I think um, part of it was taking like our HR function to be less tactical and more strategic, and really being a part of the business and a part of the operations. And so when I walked in, that was my goal. And part of it was hiring JC and creating a dedicated person to think every day about that attracting and onboarding process, and then also being a part of the discussions around developing our employees and promoting them. um, I think as you think about going from tactical to strategic, recruiting is not just getting a rec and filling it. It is like you're in the business, you're talking with the teams, you're building that relationship. And that is just so crucial in every aspect, to be seen as a key partner to help the business succeed, because we're all here to make a business great and to make, usually it boils down to what we have at our Newcastle. It's about great services to our tenants and residents. Like, we want our residents to walk out and be like, wow, I just had this amazing living experience in this amazing building, and I'm ready to leave and create a family and go out to the suburbs. Like, that's like it's amazing. And JC is a part of those conversations with the teams, just to make sure, we understand the pain points, the issues, and we're all people centric businesses, right? Everything boils down to what people are doing around those. And, I think that you have to be really ingrained and in the business to do that. And that's how I set up my team, and the part of how I operate in general, and my team operates. So aside from the technology and the engine behind it, just truly that partnership. And then, yeah, you make it creative, and you make it fun, and you make it sexy, and you make the employment brand amazing, and it comes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's, you hit it. I mean, especially like the making it sexy part. Like, that's, like, if I'm gonna do anything, I want it to be fun. I want it to be exciting. I want it to be fresh. Everything from, the way we write job descriptions, all the way through the candidate experience, getting them through the process as quickly and as seamlessly as possible, and giving them the feedback as soon as they interview, and just let them, and just kind of touching base. But just to answer your question about, like, what are some of the things you learn when you're building something new, this was the first time I've done something like this, where we're kind of starting from the beginning. There was a little bit of a foundation, I think, before we started, which was nice. But I think what I had to learn quickly was that you have to make great hires before you make any massive changes to, like, ATS, or bring in new technology or change processes. Like, you just have to make some really good hires first, get some, I guess, some respect from the business, so that they understand that you know what you're doing from a recruiting perspective. And then you can start to make suggestions on processes and the way we approach hiring. But yeah, I think, that's one of the biggest things that I learned is you have to take your time, understand the business. It helped that I came from the real estate world before, and it's really what I'm passionate about. So it kind of gives me like that extra push to do what I do. But, Mark's been great. Like I said, I remember when he interviewed, he was like, this is what I need. He didn't say this is how I want it done. He said, this is what I need, and it's up to you to figure it out. In other words, but it was great because I'm very creative and, kind of self-starting from that perspective. And I think right now, like, we're focusing on, how do we stay active when it's a little bit slower? I think he and I worked very similarly in the sense that we kind of need the pressure to produce really good work. So now it's like, okay, how do we keep the pressure on ourselves, whereas the business is not the one that's putting pressure on us? So it's an interesting ride. If you guys have any suggestions on how to navigate that, that'd be great.
Well, another kind of point, you guys have both referenced like a lot of business like changes and being aligned with the business. I know Newcastle's gone through a variety of business changes over the past few years and actually even a rebrand, I believe. But like, how does HR communicate those changes, and what kind of role do you play in those rebranding and larger business decisions and changes?
Yeah, so I'll take that. And I think we had a soft rebrand. So we did a slight name change more at the corporate level. We had our CEO transitioned out last year, found a founder and CEO who, decided to do something different. So we transitioned him last year, and still a big piece of the business and the history of it. And the new leadership team is like fully engaged and moving it forward. My role, and JC's a part of this as well, is, really, I mean, we're part of the team to make all these decisions, right? So my team is as integrated, like I was saying, as any other function of the area. And I think we spearhead with my head of marketing and that team and our branding piece, like the communication strategy around that, because from my angle and how we operate at Newcastle Investors is transparency and upfront honesty is on what we're doing and how we're doing it. And if there are changes in the business, we're explaining the reasons of why and how, and supporting the teams as we go through any slight changes with our strategy. So we're the first call, if you will, to kind of help figure it out as a team, and then really make sure, everyone understands kind of a path that we can explain very clearly and still keep them really motivated and engaged within their current role and excited about what this business is doing, which I think you can probably hear from both of us. We love our roles. We love our business. We love what we do and what we produce for the Chicago residents and tenants that we support. And part of that is, even if the business shifts, even if the market's a little bit slower or there's a little bit of a strategy change here or there, our jobs are to keep the teams really excited about what they do and the opportunity that they have. And that keeps the promotion cycle going. And we've done a lot more internal, promotions, JC, I would think, this year than
Yeah.
last year and this year. We've done a lot of like more stretch roles, if you will, and promotions into positions versus just going outside, because we want to really keep these great employees that we have, to keep moving them up. And we're diverse not only by role, but by age demographics as well. So we understand the dynamics of, Gen Z, Millennial, Gen X, and we're very in tune with that. So as we do shifts in the business, making sure that we're addressing those groups and giving people the opportunity and the platforms that they need. And it's been great. We've probably promoted, I would say, without looking at specific percentages, but upwards of 20% of our business within the past year and a half, if not more.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think you hit it on the, two things, the transparency, and then even when things are slow, keeping your employees engaged, excited. And then if you can do internal promotions, I mean, that goes a ton in a slower market.
Yeah.
JC, quick question for you. And it's a little bit more kind of just like how you manage the personal ups and downs of recruiting. We talked to so many recruiters, and the past 2 years have been the highs of highs, the lows of lows. Being in this space for a while, how do you manage the ups and downs and just kind of try to stay as even as possible when it is such a wild ride?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think I laugh because it's like, I think from the outside looking in, recruiting is such a like high energy, very chipper type of role. And I think people look at us as like the ones who are always excited about everything that we're doing.
Yep.
And and the truth is that we see everything behind the scenes, right? We see everything behind the scenes. We also have faced like a really crazy past 5 years, without saying some of the buzzwords around that. Yeah, no, I think, for me, I hit a wall at back in like 2021, right before I came to Newcastle, actually. I went off to a different organization in a very different industry, and I realized it wasn't for me. Like it was also the beginning of the Great Resignation, which it was a retail company. So 90% of our stores were completely understaffed. Like I would get calls from people, saying, "Hey, I can't open my store because I have no employees. Like, what do I do?"
Yeah.
And as we both know, you can't just like post a job and then have interviews the same day, especially when you walk through a mall, and most of the stores were in malls. You would walk through those malls and every single store had a now hiring sign. And so, yeah, I think it was a perfect combination of just like high stress, high anxiety type of environment. And so, I had to take a step back at that point and really assess like what I really wanted. I hit a wall, and when I say I hit a wall, like drove me to a panic attack, that sort of thing. Like that's from like a mental health perspective. That's when I fully realized that like I can't continue like this if I want to do this for the rest of my career. And so, I had to dive into therapy and all types of I guess support activities, whether it's like just being honest with my family, my friends, and just about being where I'm at. But I think that's kind of helped me develop a practice of just like self-care, whether that's reading or making sure that I'm active and keeping my body moving and all that good stuff. I think what I definitely learned there is that you need to ask for help, and in recruiting, you want to carry it all yourself. And I've been in those roles where, again, I was working on 40, 50 roles at a time when I first started. And so I was used to carrying it all on my back. And I think that just opened my eyes to the possibilities of like what comes when you actually, say that you actually need help and you need some support. And so, yeah, it's definitely built a high level of resilience, I think, over the last few years, and just continually like developing myself and making sure that I'm ready for whatever changes come. I will say we'll probably never see what we saw like 2020, 2021, hopefully ever again. But that experience, and Mark can relate, I think, when at his time at Brody, right? Like I think there was a lot in that season that a lot of us learned about ourselves, but also how much we can handle. And so we're ready for whatever comes next.
Yeah, a lot of people got burnt out. And I think just, taking it back to control what you can control. Like you said, ask for help when you can. It's going to be up
Yeah.
and down. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was the most wild time in recruiting I've seen in
Yeah.
15 years. So
Yeah.
Speaking of which, work from home, in the office. I know those are two trigger buttons, but I know in the real estate space, there's always an importance of being, I think, in the office for a lot of the employees. How, was Newcastle's approach to returning to the office and managing the cultural shifts that we've seen within the remote work during that, weird 2020 and 2021 period of time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So our teams, a majority of the teams were frontline employees, right? So they were actually in the office during the majority of COVID. One period we had people remote, but because we're in the properties and servicing the residents and taking care of the residents, it was again a wild ride for them on not just like dealing with day-to-day stuff, but dealing with COVID protocols and keeping people safe and secure and or safe and healthy, within the residence when you have a 40 floor multifamily property and everyone's in this same elevator bank. So a lot of our employees were still within the offices, and it was just part of that was making sure that they felt protected and comfortable as a team. And even though we were more on the skeleton crew and we adjusted shifts so everyone wasn't there at the same time, just keeping again engagement active and happening. Our corporate office was a little bit different. So we do have a corporate office at 150 that has more of the financial, like the finance roles, HR, asset management, development sitting there. And we continue to be flexible today. I think that's a key. It's like flexible while still driving high productivity with the teams. We haven't seen a dip with people's work ethics. I think the biggest discussion we had was making sure that as we hired new people and some people that were relatively new in their careers, making sure that they were still learning from the team that might not have been around them 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, because people were moving in and out of our offices or having a hybrid schedule. So I think our teams did a really good job of making sure like just virtual connectivity was there. Still, today we have team days in our corporate office. So we do have 2 days where most of the business is there, and we do a big role of making sure that we're creating a little bit of space so we can gather and still have that like team collaboration happening, whether that's lunches with like lunch and learns or just something to keep people excited for coming into the office around that. But we have a big group of young families too happening right now. So that plays a part into it whenever, we've had a really big group of people having their first or second newborn in the family. So I think the key with flexibility in the office is that as it makes sense while still keeping a little bit of that like baseline of like we got to be in together and learn from each other, whether that's physical or remote as it happens. And we've done a pretty good job of that, I believe.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you guys have been able to figure it out, because I know some organizations are still struggling to figure out what the balance is.
Yeah.
Last question before we get into kind of our more fun segment. HR, TA, it continues just to be, as we've talked throughout this podcast, more intertwined with the business than most organizations. I guess when you guys are meeting with your hiring managers, your business leaders, what are some of the top initiatives that you're hearing? What are people excited about for going into 2025? Would love just to kind of hear what you're thinking from an outlook for the next 12 months.
Yeah. JC, want to kick it off or?
Yeah, and this is maybe specific to the real estate world. I think everyone wants to know like where are we headed, as an industry. And I think people are really excited about maybe new developments, new transactions. I don't know that that'll happen in 2025 at the scale that we've seen before. But I think that's kind of the overall sentiment. Even when I talk to candidates or just, when I'm networking, people are just excited about like, okay, I have all these skills. I have all this experience, like I want to use it and I want to utilize it. And so people I think are kind of excited and looking forward to the future in the real estate world. And I think internally too, I think people they want to continue to grow. I think that's going to be what's going to set your companies apart over the next few years is how are you developing your people and what kind of investment are you putting in them so that they understand that this is a place where they can grow and develop their skills for the future. And yeah, like, you're going to see a lot of hoarding of talent, I think, which will be interesting because, I think anytime there's a economic uncertainty or kind of uncertainty in culture or whatever the case is, I think strong leadership is always going to be necessary. So I think every hire going forward is going to matter, even more than before. So yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement around real estate specifically. I'm sure you're seeing that in other industries as well. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think the other thing outside of just like the career growth perspective, a lot of what I'm hearing both in my network and leaders on our business trying to get prepared is like our AI, right? So it's just, it feels like the early days of like www.com, right? So we're going to be living there with AI. And I think we're kind of excited to see what technology brings to the table and how HR integrates that. And I think for our business, JC, I think you would agree, it's probably recruiting is the biggest like ROI at it, like first out the gate from my perspective.
Yeah.
We're not a large company, so I've seen what Microsoft does and is doing with their businesses with AI, and just seeing how that technology adopts into how we deal with our day to day. And JC's already been doing amazing stuff with it from a candidate perspective to start out with, and it's going to go fast. And I think it'll be quite interesting to see how it becomes part of our business as usual, and as well as protecting. So cybersecurity is top of mind for us, making sure as part of a pension, making sure we're protecting our pension, making sure we have cybersecurity and all those dialed up in such a different way, because now AI is such a big piece of that, and it's completely different on how we thought about it yesterday. And so that's going to be quite interesting, I think, as we go into the next year and a half and see how that moves around.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the past year and a half, everyone's been talking about it. And the next year and a half, we'll see more and more changes.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
well, we like to wrap our podcast with a little bit more of a fun, casual kind of section. It's our unfiltered random question segment where we just ask you a few more less formal questions. So the first one is, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, could be dead, alive, whoever, who would it be and why?
You're giving them, dead or alive too?
Yeah, I think they could have, but alive is fine too, but like, yeah.
One person?
You can name a few if you'd like.
I'll start out. So I will say Julius Caesar.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going dead.
I love it. I've not heard anyone say that.
I was recently in Italy for the first time about, I guess, 9 months ago or so, like this past year. And I was blown away by the Roman ruins. Like I was like, how did I miss this? Like, I didn't realize it existed the way it
Right.
exists. So if you ever walk through them and done a formal tour there, it is like I was so blown away. And I think just it'd be interesting to learn about how they lived, politics, the government, how businesses were created. I mean, you can really see it. And it was shocking to me. I had no idea. And or maybe I forgot from my like early like times and learning about the Roman Empire back in, grammar school or whatever it was, high school. But I think that would be interesting because I think when you just you learn history, it's part of like the future, right? Like, you learn from the history and it shapes how you think about the future. And I think that'll be quite interesting. So that's mine.
Crazy part of history, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like at least in my schooling, I don't remember learning the detail of it because Mark's same. I went to Rome, gosh, a year and a half ago, and I just felt like I was learning so much for the first time.
Yeah, it was really mind-blowing. I was like just shocked to walk through it. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. JC, what about you?
I don't know how I follow that answer up. No, there's one person alive that I think about. His name is Ed Milet, if you're familiar. He's actually one of the most motivational. I think he's the number one motivational speaker right now in the world. But I mean, he's got an amazing story, but also like, he's somebody that if you have dinner with him, you're probably going to feel like you can conquer the world the next day. And so that's definitely someone I want that type of conversation. Those are the types of conversation I always kind of lean on. I want to know what drives someone, what their vision is, all that good stuff. So that would be a great conversation. I would probably run through a wall right afterwards. I'd probably need dinner with my wife so that she can bring me back down to earth the next day. But yeah, no, Ed Milet, that's a strong one, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna look him up. Yeah,
modern age, maybe Tony Robbins type.
Yeah. I think he's probably gonna surpass Tony Robbins. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. And then one more question, and we kind of touched on it earlier when you were talking about the burnout of recruiting, but just how do you both just like de-stress from a hard, tough work week, work day, work year? What are your thoughts there?
I think something that I've been doing, and this is not necessarily like brand new, but I think my wife and I, we make sure we have date nights on the calendar. Like, and that's a date night where you just focus on each other. There's nothing about the kids, nothing about work, nothing about politics or anything in the world that's happening. It's just us. And I think we usually do that at the beginning of the week to kind of set the week up for us in a nice way. And we also have family night. So I think just scheduling the things that are really important to you and make them non-negotiable, like, putting them on the calendar, making sure you've got the alerts and you're getting really excited about them and planning around them. And even if it's just like a date night at home, like just having lunch with your spouse, or if you have a friend that you want to hang out with on a weekly basis, like just put it on the calendar. I think that's going to be the most important thing to kind of keep you sane. And I think my hot tip is like doing it at the beginning of the week so that the rest of the week feels a little bit lighter.
I like that.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Mark, what about you?
I would say a little to JC's side is I was in a funk of like working out and just like a physical like exertion. So I had a Peloton from, COVID days that I never used, and finally got into my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and I are on a text chain. So we motivate each other. So we do 3 workouts a week, and we live in different states and we're the in-laws. So it kind of like brings us together a little bit more, and it's been fun to like push each other. So it's helped me get back on the bike and just old fashioned sweat it out a little bit, and just mentally feels great afterwards. So I've been doing that for the past like year, actually.
Nice.
Exercise.
Consecutive weeks.
Exercise works wonders, it definitely can easily relieve stress and give you more energy in the long run. Yeah.
I always get off the bike and I have my brain is clear and I have all these other thoughts that I'm like, I have a problem. I'm going to get on the bike and I'll like figure it out afterwards. And I usually do. So I think
and the accountability piece, I think having the text with the others, even if they're not in the same city as you, just knowing like they're doing this, I can do this. It kind of creates some friendly competition too.
Yeah. So it's been fun. So
cool.
Appreciate it, guys. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Today, we've had Mark and JC from Newcastle Investors as our guests. We discussed their career building from the ground up, rebranding, and what's to come in 2025, and much more. We'll be back again next month with a new special guest. Quick reminder of how to support the Beyond the Offer podcast. You can find all our content on HireWell's social media platform, which you can find through hirewell.com. Take care, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Mark and JC.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks, guys.